The scream cut the house into two clean halves. It started thin and high, a loop that didn't tire, slipping through the crown molding and the crystal pendants and the old pipes, as if the mansion itself were a flute. Someone played too hard. After each slice of sound came a dull, regular thud, forehead to wood like a metronome built to bruise. Maya Williams froze on the second-floor landing, with a damp microfiber cloth in one hand and a bucket rocking against her shin. 5 days on the job, and she already knew which corridors held their breath. The east wing smelled of cedar polish and money done right. The fifth floor, no one spoke about it. They turned their heads there, the way you ignore a person weeping on a subway car. A rule without words: keep clear of the upper wing. Miss, the butler called from the main hall without bothering the stairs. Stay clear of the upper wing. She didn't answer, because the cry climbed a second time, then fractured. Not hungry, not tired, panic carving a groove. In another life, a kitchen table, a boy under it with his arms locked across his chest, tapping his forehead against a chair leg in a rhythm he couldn't break until her grandmother's hands had made a small cross over her heart, safe, and hummed a low line a body could rest inside. Maya took the back staircase. The carpet softened nothing. On the fifth floor, light went thin and gray, as if the windows filtered sorrow first. Dust hung in the slant like someone had thrown glitter and changed their mind. Down the hall, a door stood open an inch. Flicker bled through a sensory projector, tossing stars on a wall. Inside, a boy, 7 at most, knees pulled to ribs, rocking hard, forehead catching the base of a low bookshelf with impossible precision. He didn't protect himself with his hands. He didn't appear to know he had hands. Maya stopped in the threshold long enough to feel the bones in her feet again. People had hurt this room with their good intentions already. She could smell the lemon cleaner and erasure. She lowered herself to the carpet 3 steps away from him, keeping her palms open, resting them where he could see them, not reaching for anything he wasn't offering. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, letting her voice be a soft thing. "I'm here. No touching. I'm just going to sit." He didn't look up. The thud shifted half a degree, still hitting, not as hard, as if the room itself had moved to catch some of the blow. She matched her breathing to his rocking, slow in, slower out, until her lungs found a pace that didn't try to win. Her fingers lifted off the carpet by inches, patient as fog. She traced a small sign across her chest, "Safe." For a fragment of a second his eyes flashed toward her, then away, as if he'd been warned about eye contact by a world that doesn't keep its promises. She stayed where she was. Sometimes the bravest thing a body can do is not move. "What the hell are you doing?" The voice at her back was hard metal. She turned. Preston Caldwell filled the doorway like a verdict tall suit that didn't dare wrinkle, a phone clenched in one hand, the other locked on the knob as if he might break it on principle. Up close, he was all square edges and exact line, the kind of man who made oxygen show its receipts. "I heard him crying," she said. "And who told you?" he said, each word balanced on the last. "To enter this room." "No one. I thought he might be in danger." "Step away from my son." Her muscles tightened even as she rose. She shifted to the side without turning her back, and left space between herself and the boy, like she was drawing a chalk circle he could keep. Preston crossed the rug and reached for the child in one practiced motion. The effect was a flare thrown into dry brush. The scream sharpened. Arms flew. Legs kicked, as if the air itself had offended. The boy clawed at nothing and found purchase on absence. "What's wrong with him?" Preston said to the floor, not to her. "Why does he?" "May I?" Maya asked. Not humble, not daring, just asking. The way you ask a locked door if it wants to stay one. He didn't grant permission with a nod. He also didn't tell her to leave. She knelt back to the carpet and did the hardest thing on earth. Nothing. She let her presence be a shape the boy could map. The scream drained, the rocking faltered, and when she opened her arms only enough to change the air, he pitched forward and burrowed into the hollow of her shoulder, like a bird that had been flying in circles around the same dark room and found the open window by accident. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of breathing, and the sound fabric makes when small fingers hold it too tight. On the wall, the projector threw a slow galaxy across their backs. Preston's shoulders dropped a half-inch. For a man built from angles, it looked like collapse. "How?" he said. The word "a blade" turned dull-side. "What did you do?" "Listened," she said. "Signed. You know sign language?" A little. Germain's name bumped her throat on the way up and stayed there. My brother was nonverbal. This helped him calm his body. Something in Preston's posture lost its vault. His eyes changed the way winter does when it remembers April exists but isn't ready to admit it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya Williams. I clean the East Wing." She felt the cheap badge on her lanyard like a dare. "You're not a therapist." "No." He watched the boy sleep where the panic had been. Face smashed awkwardly into her shoulder, breath dampening the cotton of her sleeve. The scene did not match any line items in a quarterly report. "Can you stay a little longer today?" he asked. "Yes," she said, because the question arrived like a plate she could hold with one hand. She rocked, but just enough to keep the quiet from tipping over. He left without another word. The house exhaled with him. Out in the corridor, the chandeliers gleamed like a row of teeth. On the carpet, dust motes swam in a soft current of the projector's light. When the boy's weight went heavy with sleep, Maya eased him onto a beanbag tucked in the corner and found, folded on a high shelf, a weighted blanket. No one had trusted themselves. To try, she laid it over him. The way you lay a secret where it can't roll away. His hands opened in his sleep, fingers unfisting like flowers do when you stop watching them. She circled to the door, but the house had grown heavier on its foundations. While she'd been in this room, every click of her shoes against marble on the way down said, "You crossed a line you will soon pay for, Miss Williams." She turned. Preston stood at the end of the corridor without his phone, a small legal pad in one hand, pen balanced between his fingers, like judgment weighing what words cost. He didn't look like a man who was about to fire her. He looked like a man who hadn't decided what the world was for. "In my office," he said. "Please." The office was sun in glass and wood in perfect right angles, the smell of leather and something citrus. The kind of air that tastes like it has a policy. He gestured to a chair. She sat with her hands flat on her thighs to keep them from trying to explain her. He stayed behind the desk long enough to be seen still standing. Then he sat. "You handled him," he said, tapping the pen tip once against the pad, like someone who's done it 100 times. "Not with him," she said. "With somebody like him. Your brother," he said. His voice didn't so much soften as lose a layer. "Germain." 4 years folded themselves between the syllables. "He died at 10. A Zeitzura." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." They let the clock down the hall tick twice. Seconds didn't rush here. They arrived, sat, and asked for coffee. "No expert," he said finally. "No specialist. No therapist has been able to calm Eli like that. Not in 2 years." He looked at the pen like it was a thing he could blame. "And you walked in with a rag and I didn't fix him," she said. "I saw him." The pen stopped. The room realigned by a degree. He leaned back, not to tower, to see her without the desk cutting him in half. "You sound like someone who should be doing more than mopping floors," he said. I'm someone who needed a job. She said, my grandmother's pills don't care what I should be doing. He closed the legal pad. The way you close a door. But leave your hand on the knob. I want you to stay, he said, not as staff for the East Wing, as Ellie's constant, not a nanny, something else. Someone he trusts already. I clean, she said. I'm not trained. I don't need a degree. He said, I need what happened upstairs. It wasn't magic, she said. It was care. She heard Loretta's voice say it with a laugh. Baby, if God opens a door, don't stand there arguing with the knob. Whatever you need, he said, as if money were a tool and not a god. I'll make it easy. It won't be easy, she said, and watched relief move through his face at the honesty of that. It might be right. When would you start? Tomorrow, she said. It wasn't bravery, it was gravity. He stood and put out a hand. She took it. His grip was firm, practiced, and for one count of breath he held on like the handshake kept something in place. When she left the office, the hallway felt longer than it had on the way in. On a sideboard, a bowl of blue glass caught the late afternoon sun and threw it in a thin ring against the wall. She paused, feeling the echo of the boy's breath on her shoulder, the weight of the blanket in her hands, the word she had signed without sound. Safe. Down in the staff hall, Mrs. Green stood with a tray and a look that said she knew when changes came baked into a day. Roasted salmon, she said, lifting the lid. Someone thinks you forgot lunch. I lost time, Maya said. Time doesn't mind being lost, Mrs. Green said. It finds its way back when it's ready. Maya carried the tray to her small room, set it on the desk, and opened the window an inch. Camellias in the back garden shifted in a breeze she could almost call spring. She ate with the speed of a person who has learned to accept kindness without apologizing for needing it. After, she took the frame of her grandmother off the nightstand and set it near the window, where the light would touch it in the morning. You'd like him, she told the glass. You'd like that he's a mess and trying. Upstairs, somewhere above the crown molding and the chandeliers and the hush people buy when they don't know what else to purchase, the projector clicked off. The house gathered itself around the new quiet, like a body pulling a blanket over its shoulders. Something had shifted, not a miracle, a hinge, and it had learned how to swing again. Morning came thin and pale, the kind of light that rinses the edges off things. Maya dressed quietly, fingers learning the lock of her new door, the smell of fresh paint still in the staff wing like a promise they rushed to keep. She poured coffee into a chipped mug. Mrs. Green pressed into her hand, strong, bitter, alive, and carried its heat into the corridor like a small shield. Outside the nursery, the air cooled. She could hear the soft whir of the sensory projector, a starfield breathing on the far wall. She paused with her palm on the frame, counted her own breaths like steps on a path she didn't want to trample, and slipped inside without a word. Eli was awake, stuck, eyes tracking dust like snow he could command. He didn't look at her, but he didn't bolt either. She lowered herself to the rug, cross-legged, palms open, the way you sit with a skittish dog who's learned that hands sometimes don't mean hands. Morning, she said, as if morning were a person they might both trust. The room smelled of cotton and graphite and a sweet leftover vanilla that clung to the curtains. A whiteboard leaned against the bookcase with a frayed eraser tucked in its tray like a tongue. She drew a circle, then a second, smaller, off to the side like a moon. She slid the marker to a neutral spot between them and waited, willing the space to carry intent without weight. He didn't take it at first. His fingers twitched near his shin, caught by an itch he couldn't find. She hummed a low line. Loretta's kitchen in the sound steam, cinnamon, something sturdy, under everything, and felt her breath settle where it could do the most good. Not as instruction, as shelter. He reached for the marker. The cap resisted. He pulled until it let go with a soft, surprised pop. He pressed a heartbeat onto the board, one crooked heart that leaned left like it had been running late since birth, and set the marker down as if it might break if he looked at it too long. "Yeah," she said. That, her throat burned a little. The good kind. The kind that tells you a thing is true. She didn't clap or cheer or name it a milestone. She let it be a shape in the room that belonged to him. The projector flickered. Light crawled over her sleeve. A galaxy trying on cotton. Silence turned warm at the edges and held. From the hall, a shadow paused. Leather soles stopped just short of the threshold, as if the doorway were a river, and he was measuring its depth. Preston didn't speak, didn't clear his throat, didn't announce anything. The quiet took his measure, and decided for the first time that it would keep him. He stepped inside when the moment could bear it. "Good morning," he said, voice a notch lower than business allowed. He was rolled sleeves and clean shave, and a tie he hadn't bothered to knot yet, and his eyes did something new, something like learning an alphabet with his hands. "How is he?" The question landed softly, like a plate waiting on a table you respect. Maya tilted her head toward the board. "Peaceful," she said. "Steady." She kept her tone level, as if weathering could be catalogued. She didn't say, "He drew a heart and handed it back to me without looking up," which is a kind of courage. Preston crouched near his son. "Hey, buddy," he said, the words bending at the knees to meet the floor. Eli didn't recoil. He rolled a toy train by inches, as if rails were rules he'd agree to for now. "He used to love trains," Preston said, "half to the engine, half to the air. Railroad museum. Saturdays." The last word came softened, a corner rubbed smooth by use. Maya watched his hand. They hovered near the tracks but didn't land. The hover of a man who has paid for a lot of help and only lately suspects the bill. She placed her own beside his flat, visible, unthreatening with space between palm and rug. Enough for Eli to pass through without brushing skin. "You don't force an invitation," she said. Her voice made a room inside the room. "You wait and make it easy to say yes." He nodded like the lesson hurt a little and helped more. "Show me," he said. The three words cost him pride and returned him something he couldn't name. She signed, slowly. More. Thumb to fingers. A soft tap. The gesture as simple as breathing on glass. Ellie watched, eyes moving from her hands to his father's wrists, the way a child checks a tide before stepping off a rock. Preston tried it. His version was clumsy, earnest, precise as a man who files his own receipts in color-coded folders. Eli copied half the movement, then pressed the train gently into Preston's palm, like passing a torch he didn't want to put words on. The air changed. It lengthened. For a second, they were three bodies held by the same quiet, and the quiet chose to stay. Later, when the projector stuttered and went dark, sunlight took over without asking. It slanted across the floor, catching dust, lifting them all into the same soft weather. Eli leaned against the low bookshelf, not rocking now, fingers working the corner of a cardboard puzzle box, like he was telling it a secret he might consider sharing. "Lunch," Mrs. Green called from the hall, the word carrying butter and authority. "Eat while the world isn't looking." They ate at the small table under the window, the kind meant for tea and relief bowls of soup, rich with thyme and pepper. Eli pressed his lips to the spoon and decided yes. Preston watched him not as a man counting bites, but as a man learning how a boy's mouth makes room for heat. After Maya found the camellias from last night in the garden. Wind fussed them. She tilted her face to it and let the leaves talk. Footsteps on gravel. Slow. Measuring. You come here every day? Preston asked. Just started, she said. He held a book. Its spine was tired. Cover nicked. The way books look in homes that haven't given up. I found this. Emma kept notes. Early sensory stuff. Signs. I thought. We can read it, Maya said, taking the weight like it mattered where it fell. She didn't say Emma's name but heard it in the paper. They sat under the pergola, wood warm under their thighs, bees preoccupied around the rosemary like diligent mechanics. Preston read a line, then stopped at a margin scribble in a woman's looping hand. She used to laugh right here, he said, touching the page. At my hands, said I signed like a bad magician. Maya smiled because grief sometimes needs the small mercy of a joke. Bad magicians get applause, she said. He huffed and let himself have the moment. What changed? He asked. He meant, when did this house decide to breathe? She traced her thumb along a splinter in the bench and watched it catch and release. Time, she said. Presence. Letting him lead. The bench creaked as something settled, a board or a story. A wind chime answered from somewhere out of view. A note low enough to sit on. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. I controlled everything, he said, simply as listing inventory, as if order could bargain with sickness. She kept her eyes on the camellias. Grief makes us grab what doesn't move, she said. Doesn't mean we're supposed to live there. He nodded like a man whose map had been slightly wrong for years. Teach me, he said again. Not louder, truer. Teach me how to be enough. Back inside, they built a routine that could carry weight. Morning, sensory play on a mat that took the edge off noise. Afternoon, small signs, fewer words. Objects passed like sentences you don't want to write down yet. Eli's hands learned to ask, stop, help, love. Preston's hands learned to answer, not perfect, not smooth, but honest, which seemed to be the currency here. Sometimes he'd fumble and apologize. Maya would shake her head, then show him again, and he'd try with a patience he didn't know he owned. At dusk, the house changed tint. Shadows wrote themselves along the baseboards like long, careful sentences. From the music room, a place that had been a stage mere furniture stood on, came the clumsy start of a melody. Maya paused in the hall. Preston sat at the old upright, the finish dulled by years of quiet. A key half sticky in the right register. He found a progression and stayed with it. As if anchoring the day to sound, she stepped in, stood beside the bench. You play, she said. I used to, he said. He promised him lessons. Keep the promise, she said. Soft as cotton. He started over. She hummed, then lifted her hands and signed the lullaby her grandmother used to fold into nights simple, patient, true. The notes filled the room without crowding it. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor hissed and settled. Eli's door stayed open a hand's width, enough for light to know the way. On the piano's fallboard, a hairline crack caught the lamplight and threw it back in a thin, stubborn line. Extraordinary, Preston said, not as a compliment but as an observation he wasn't ready to argue with. I'm just present, Maya said. Most people aren't, he said, his finger brushing her wrist like a question that didn't need an answer yet. They kept playing until the house made that sound old houses make when they remember their bones. Silence settled over the last chord, not heavy, exact. Maya felt the shape of the day inside it, the boy's heart on the board, the train in a steady hand, the book with its tired spine. Night deepened. The camellias outside turned to coin under the porch light. Upstairs, a small body shifted and sighed the way sleep admits defeat. Maya stood at the balcony window in the staff wing, and watched their breath blur the glass in the nursery across the courtyard. One slow cloud, then another, then none. She lifted a finger and traced a small shape in her own pane. Safe. It hung there a second before the warmth gave up and the mark faded. She let it go the way you let a moment be what it is, and not what it will cost. In the quiet, a clock took its time. Her phone lay face down on the desk, a photo of Loretta turned toward the window to catch any moon that showed up. She sat and wrote a single line in a battered notebook. He asked with his hands. She closed the book, laid her palm flat, and felt the wood return the pressure, as if to say, yes, and keep going. Somewhere between the last note and the new day, the house remembered how to be a home and decided not to apologize for it. The heart on the whiteboard had dried to a faint, chalky film. Maya wiped it with the edge of her sleeve, and the ghost of it stayed, a pale print, like the place a hand leaves on a window. She let it be. Some marks were meant to linger. In the kitchen, she whisked eggs and cinnamon into milk until the smell reached the hallway and pulled small feet toward light. Eli padded in with his bear under one arm. He climbed onto a stool, nässtukt, eyes on the pan like a cat watching a red dot. Preston followed. Tea loose, hair damp, a man trying on an easier morning and finding it almost fits. French toast, he asked. He likes the edges crisp, she said. I'll remember. He set plates, then corrected a fork so it wouldn't wobble. Eventually, Eli's mouth took to the first bite and decided, yes. Syrup threaded his fingers. He pressed his palm to the plate and lifted it, watching the print appear, a sticky heart that looked nothing like the one on the whiteboard, and exactly like it anyway. Park, Preston said, as if asking the weather to behave would make it so. After breakfast, Maya met his eyes. It was a bigger step than the sentence allowed. We go slow, she said. We leave if he asks. He nodded. We follow him. They packed like people who mean to stay but won't force it. Snacks, wipes, a blanket that had learned the shape of comfort, a collapsible stroller that creaked a protest and then complied. Outside, the air was clean with late spring and cut grass. The driveway hummed under the tires. Piedmont Park unspooled green and wide, all those bodies moving at different speed. Dogs dragging their people, kids arrowing toward the lake without permission. Sun draped itself across the water. Somewhere, someone burned hot dogs too early. They found a patch of shade beneath an oak that had decided long ago to be generous. The blanket went down. Eli stood at its edge and looked out like a scout, breath shallow, eyes catching on too many moving parts. Maya crouched beside him, turned her palm up. Didn't touch. You choose, she said. You lead. He took one step, then another. A pair of boys threw a baseball farther out. The ball smacked glove. A clean, hollow sound. Eli's head tilted. He didn't move toward them, but his gaze held long enough for something to register and file itself as interesting rather than threat. Maya passed him an apple slice. He bit and chewed like thinking. The world pushed on all sides. Shadows shifted. Wind moved the leaves and brushed the skin just under his ear. He flinched, then let the sensation pass through. Preston lay on his side on the blanket, propped on an elbow, trying to look like a person who does this often. He watched Eli's hands as if they were giving instructions, and maybe they were. He didn't crowd. He didn't coach. He let the boy circle in a radius that belonged entirely to him. A woman in a neon running top slowed near the tree, sunglasses, reflecting a neat version of them back at themselves. Preston, she called, pitch bright with recognition, a little too early in the day. Rebecca. Thorne. Chamber dinner? He pushed himself up fast, back straightening almost to attention. Of course, he said. the words reaching for old muscle memory. Rebecca's glance flicked from him to Maya to the child. This must be your son. Smile. Measured. Glad to see. Progress. Maya kept her focus on Eli's breathing, ridges of his ribs moving under the cotton of his shirt. She felt the heat slide up her neck. Familiar as a bruise. Your new nanny, Rebecca said. Her name is Maya Williams, Preston said. His tone didn't spike. It settled. She's family. Rebecca's mouth registered surprise and dressed itself as a new smile. Nice, she said. We should catch up. Preston. Her ponytail swished indecisively as she jogged off. Maya brushed breadcrumbs from the blanket. Preston's jaw worked once, then unclenched. I'm sorry, he said. Quiet. You don't have to be. She met his eyes. I know who I am. A breeze slipped under the oak leaves and made a sound like paper. Eli crouched and aligned pebbles, small circles inside larger ones, until a crude heart took shape on the dirt. He pressed his finger to the center of it and looked up, checking if anyone had tried to steal the moment. They hadn't. They stayed an hour. Ducks laughed with their beaks. A stroller squeaked a complaint. Maya watched. Eli watched the world and felt her own lungs learn something about capacity. Leaving was clean, no wrestling, no bribing, just a hand. Finding a hand and a quiet walk back to the car. By evening, the house had its library smell again. Old paper, lemon oil, dust polite enough to settle out of sight. Preston set a photo album on the leather sofa, like presenting evidence he was both proud of and afraid to see. His hands hovered over the cover, then opened it. Emma's handwriting threaded the margins. An easy loop of notes and dates, baby Eli in a knit cap, Emma under a maple tree with a line in her arm, and a smile that refused to apologize. Maya sat close enough to read, far enough not to touch the page first. She started this the month we found out, he said. I stopped adding after she. He didn't finish the sentence, and the air didn't force him. Maya let the photos do the work. The light on Emma's cheekbone, the way her hand cupped the baby's head with a confidence that laughed at fear. The last picture, the one under the maple, glowed with late sun. She placed a fingertip near the edge of the sleeve and didn't press. She loved him, she said. She did. He closed the book and held the weight of it a second longer than necessary. I shut down. I made a list of everything I could control and mistook it for a plan. Maya looked at the fireplace, though no fire burned. You were surviving. Doesn't feel like much of a defense. It isn't. It's just the truth. He breathed out. Long. Something in his shoulders let go by a fraction. I want to make this official, he said. Not the dusting. Us. The work with Eli. I want you here to lead it. Training. Resources. Whatever you need. On one condition, she said. He waited. We do it as a team, she said. No titles between us. Not in the room with him. Deal. He extended his hand again. A reflex and a promise. She took it. His palm was cooler than the album's leather. Dinner was salmon and asparagus, because Mrs. Green believed in mercies that repeat. At the table, Eli reached into the napkin drawer and chose blue for Maya, red for himself, yellow for Preston. He set them carefully, one corner precisely against the plate edges, then sat and looked at each of them in turn, as if checking their colors matched the people they had become. After plates clicked empty and the house went quieter than quiet, they ended up in the room with the piano. The old upright owned its scars. The finish rubbed thin, where hands had hovered but not landed for years. Preston played a simple progression, halting, and then again, less halting, until the notes stacked neat in the dusk. Would you sit? He asked, without looking up. She did, shoulder to shoulder. No heat in it, just gravity. She hummed the same low line from Morning the Kitchen, the cinnamon, Loretta's hum that had framed 1,000 nights, and let her hands sign the lullaby across the space between them. Touch without touching, language without sound. He stopped playing to watch her fingers. "What are you saying?" he asked. "Come back," she said, and the room took it as prayer and instruction both. He played again, slower still. Outside, the camellias were coins in the porch light. Inside, a strand of hair had escaped Maya's braid and hung before her eye. She blew it away, and the air moved the candle flame on the mantel. The room held its breath at that small shift. Preston's hand brushed her wrist where a vein ran close to the surface. He didn't grip. He asked. She didn't pull away. She answered. The cord resolved. Upstairs. Air changed. A monitor crackled and went soft. Then a small voice tried itself out on a word it hadn't dared in ages. Dada. The sound cut through wood and carpet and history. Preston froze, then moved, knocking the bench with his knee. Maya was already up, the lullaby still living in her hands even as she ran. They took the stairs too fast and landed in the doorway at the same breath. Eli sat upright, hair everywhere, chest working hard under fabric. He looked at his father like recognizing someone from a dream you wanted to return to. His mouth open. Nothing came, but his hand reached and pressed flat against Preston's shirt, right over the heart. One tap, another, a rhythm he could own. Preston sank to his knees and folded over him, a man unlearning armor. "You did it," he whispered into hair that smelled like sleep. "You did it." Maya stayed at the edge of the room, palms turned out, feeling warmth spread under her skin, as if someone had lit a lamp in her ribs. She didn't say a word. She watched the way the light from the hall made a small heart on the floor, where it met the nursery carpet, and thought, remember this, without framing it. When Eli's breathing slowed and his hand dropped, when the boy's weight found the mattress again and the room sighed, they backed out, careful with the hin, careful with the air. In the hall, Preston leaned against the wall like the house was the only sturdy thing left. Tears made his eyes bright and unashamed. He said, "He didn't finish. He didn't have to." Maya set her hand against the paint, flat, at the height of a small chest. One tap, another. "He's talking," she said, just in the language he trusts. They stood there until the night thinned. Downstairs, the piano waited, the last chord still humming inside the wood if you knew where to listen. On the whiteboard in the nursery, the heart she'd tried to erase that morning showed faintly when the nightlight touched it, a chalk ghost that refused to leave. She went to her room and opened the window an inch. The glass took her breath and made a fog circle. She drew a tiny heart in it with her knuckle. It blurred, then vanished. The air cooled her hand. Some marks were meant to linger where only the body remembers. Some were meant to disappear so you could make them again. The morning opened with a knock that sounded like a verdict. Maya stood over the stove, oatmeal thickening, cinnamon rising off the steam. The sound traveled through the marble like metal on bone, 3 strikes, evenly spaced. Not a visitor, an event. She turned the burner low and wiped her palms on a towel that still smelled faintly of lemon. Preston reached the door first. His bare feet whispered on stone. When he opened it, cool air slid in and carried the scent of clipped hedges and something official toner. A stiff cologne that tried too hard. 3 people on the stoop. A man with a clipboard and measured eyes. Another with a messenger bag. A woman in a blazer, with a radio wire curling into her hair. The crest on the leather folder read like a threat delivered politely. "Mr. Caldwell?" the lead asked. "Yes, I'm Marcus Fielding, Child Welfare Services. We received a report concerning Elijah Caldwell. We're here for an assessment." Maya appeared in the hallway with a dish towel still in her hand. Eli tucked his face against her hip. the fabric of her shirt damp, where his breath found it. She felt his fingers bunch the hem and hold. "Who filed the report?" Preston asked. "I can't disclose the source during an initial check," Marcus said. "No heat, no malice, just training. No entry until I speak to counsel." Preston said. "You have that right," Marcus said, glancing at the woman with the radio. "If you refuse, we'll escalate to a court order." Silence thickened in the foyer. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hesitate before giving the next second away. Maya rubbed small circles at the base of Eli's skull. A touch, just shy of touch. His breath slowed by inches. "Give me 5 minutes," Preston said. He closed the door just short of slamming and moved. Two calls his lawyer. Then a security contractor whose voice had that calm of men who open rooms with codes. He opened the door wide when he came back. "You can come in," he said, "but you do it under observation. And you don't touch anything without consent." Marcus nodded once. They stepped over the threshold like crossing into a place that would remember them. The foyer smelled of wood oil and a bowl of oranges Mrs. Green had set exactly where the light could make them righteous. "Where is Elijah now?" Marcus asked. "Here," Maya said. "She didn't say with me." She let the weight of the boy against her side prove it. "May we speak with him privately?" "No," she said. "Steady. He doesn't speak with strangers. He has autism. I can translate signs if you need." Marcus wrote something. The scratch of his pen sounded louder than it should. The woman with the radio drifted a practiced glance up the staircase like trouble might prefer the second floor. They walked the house as if it were a patient. Pantry, nursery, backyard, where wind made the chimes say the same low note twice. In the sunroom, light pooled on the floor like warm milk. Eli watched it, then looked away. A man deciding where to place his feet on a boat. "Routine?" Marcus asked, standing in the doorway. "Sensory mornings," Maya said. "Quiet afternoons. He leads. Medical care. Up to date." Preston said, "We can provide records." The woman in the blazer crouched to the level of a basket of blocks, tapped one with her nail, listened to the hollow plastic answer. "Elia," she said, pitching her voice soft. "Do you like red?" Eli's mouth tightened. Maya signed love with 2 hands, small and slow, not toward him but near him, as if reminding the room it could choose how to speak. He reached out and put his palm over her knee, a claim and a request in one simple press. Marcus closed his folder. "This appears to be a safe environment," he said. "We'll file accordingly." He paused at the door. Wind lifted a camellia petal and set it back down a foot to the left. "Off the record, Mr. Caldwell," Marcus said, almost human. "It's rare we see this level of care. Whoever made the call may have had interests beyond your son." Preston's jaw flexed once. "Noted," he said. The door's side shut behind them, and the house ate the sound. In the echo, Maya felt the small throb in her palm where Eli's grip had been, a heart in the hand, mapped in heat. She looked down at him. His lashes stuck together in little triangles from the stress, sweat at his temples. She lifted a corner of her shirt and dabbed. "Someone is trying to get to us," she said, eyes on the fabric. It was easier to aim at cotton than at anger. Preston stared at the wood grain of the door like it might give him names. "I have a good guess," he said. By afternoon, his office had become a war room. The blinds were half closed, light cut into slats, the air conditioner pushing a low, precise hum that never found a draft to argue with. Papers lined the desk in the orderly chaos of a man who had learned how to look messy when it helped. Sandra Griffin, the lawyer, perched on the edge of a chair like a hawk, considers a fence post. She doesn't trust. Lionel Hatch, silver-haired and unhurried, laid a tablet on the desk. Screen dark. until he woke it with a finger that had done this in rooms without windows. This wasn't random, Preston said. We've had pressure on the acquisition. Now this access, Sandra asked. Working on it, Lionel said. He didn't fill the room. He deflated everything in it until only lines mattered. I pulled 60 days of outgoing communications. There's a ghost account still pinging your calendar. Old assistant, Preston said. Sylvia Warner, Lionel said. Terminated 6 months ago. Someone forgot to cut her cloud-level access. He rotated the tablet. The screen showed a breadcrumb trail of stupid decisions. She's engaged to Greg Sinclair. Lark Technologies. Well, Sandra said, tilting her head. That's delicate. Not really. Lionel said. It's clumsy. Which helps us. Maya stood in the corner near the ficus that had never looked like it belonged. She folded her arms because her hands didn't know where to rest. Next, she asked, we file a countersuit. Sandra said. Defamation. Abuse of agency. We bring the call into the light and make them explain it on record. She looked at Maya as if measuring her against a checklist, then softened. It will get ugly. I don't have anything to hide, Maya said, even if she did. Preston said, it wouldn't change what she is to my son. To me, Lionel's eyebrows ticked up the smallest degree. He wasn't here for family, but he took note when something real walked across a table. I'll lock the perimeter, he said. Digital and physical. They won't sneeze without you seeing the tissue. Can I at least get a heads up if they sneeze in my direction? Maya said. Sandra smiled brief. Earned. We'll add it to the alerts. After they left, the office woke back up to the smell of oak and the faint citrus Preston preferred for his hand wash. He leaned against the desk and let the wood hold him up without admitting it. They're coming, he said. Let them, she said. It came out too fast, then steadied. He's not a lever. Twilight found them on the back porch swing. The porch light made a halo of gnats, the good kind, the kind that don't bite and still make you wave your hand. Crickets rehearsed the same high part. The wind kept missing its cue. I used to think silence meant broken, Preston said. He set 2 mugs on the rail. Steam unrolled itself and disappeared. I didn't know it could mean safe. Different kinds, she said, legs tucked under her, bare heel pressed into wood gone smooth from years of bodies. Grief, shame, rest. He watched the yard as if any minute it might try something. I want to learn his language, he said. I don't want him to do all the translating. She turned her palm up between them. No touch, just space. You already are. Eli, heavy from a bath and the right kind of tired, leaned into her side and let his head find its spot near her ribs. The swing creaked. The house behind them exhaled. Somewhere in the distance, a siren considered coming closer and then thought better of it. Ever think about him talking? Preston asked, still looking at the yard. Words. I mean, sometimes, she said, but I think about what he already says more. What's that? She rocked them an inch, enough to quiet the wood. When he takes my hand without asking, she said, that's a paragraph. They sat with it. The dark pulled the edges of things inward until they were the only 3 objects that mattered. Eli shifted, breath, catching on a dream or a memory he didn't have a place for yet. His mouth shaped a sound and offered it to the night. Ma. Maya froze. Preston didn't move. The syllable landed soft and light and changed the weight of every object on the porch. Illy's eyes fluttered. He didn't say it again. He pressed his fingers into the fabric at Maya's side and sighed in a different key. The swing steadied. The night kept going. Preston let out a breath he hadn't noticed holding. He turned to her. Slow. Did you? I heard, she said. They didn't explain it. They didn't categorize. They let the words sit in the air and cool to body temperature. The steam from the mugs slid away into dark. A camellia petal came loose and landed on Maya's bare foot, a cool coin. Later, inside, Preston knelt by the sofa where Eli had drifted. He signed slow, "Safe, Daddy. Love." The shapes were not yet easy, but they were exact. Eli watched and copied the last one. Hands small, thumbs in. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Maya stood in the doorway with the porch still humming in her bones. She could smell dish, soap, and clean cotton, and the ghost of cinnamon from a morning that felt like a year ago. She thought of the heart on the whiteboard, and how it had refused to wipe away, even when she'd tried. Upstairs, in the room they called the study because calling it grief would be too on the nose. The piano was quiet. The lid reflected the lamp in a long, bent line like a scar that had done its work. She touched the wood with her knuckles. It was cool, then warm. By midnight, Lionel's people had installed their nets. Tiny cameras nested at the eaves like patient birds. Motion sensors tucked under hedges. The security feed whispered along the baseboards. Nothing dramatic, just vigilance given shape. Maya's phone buzzed once on the dresser. Unknown number. One line. "I know what you are. He'll find out." Two. "You don't belong there." Her stomach did a small ugly flip, like stepping off a curb you misjudged. She brought the phone to Preston in the hallway. He took it without comment. "Read." And the blood rose in his face, and then slowed back to normal. "This has to stop," he said. "It won't," she said. Not quickly. He lifted his hands and signed, careful, deliberate, "Safe. Maya. Love." His face was a study in stubborn restraint. "Then we fight," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. After he went back down the hall, Maya turned toward the narrow window near the linen closet. The glass was cool. She leaned her forehead to it and let her breath cloud a small oval. With one fingertip, she drew a heart inside the fog. The crooked kind that leans left. It held a second, then cleared. Some marks don't want to stay on glass. They stay under the skin. They wait there, patient, until the next knock tries the door. The courthouse air had that refrigerated bite that lives in marble. It smelled like toner, floor polish, stale coffee. On the security tray, Maya set her keys, her phone, a hair tie. Watched the plastic bowl rattle as if it had a pulse of its own. Her heart sat higher in her throat than usual. She flexed her fingers once, the ridges of a healing crescent where Eli had clutched her kneecap in the doorway. Preston stood at her shoulder in a suit, the color of a shut door. Perfect, jaw knot. "Stay close," he said. "I'm here," she said, and let the words find their own weight. Outside the courtroom, cameras blinked awake and slept. Someone's perfume dragged lilies through the hall. Lionel leaned against a column like it owed him rent. Sandra flipped a folder open and closed with a click that kept time. The brass seal over the double doors reflected them into thinner people. Inside, the room ran on stillness and electricity. The old wood was rubbed smooth, where 100 hands had slid across the rail to steady themselves. Judge Monroe took the bench like a ship entering harbor. No hurry, all gravity. Silver hair pinned so tight it looked like a choice she'd made years ago and kept. "All rise," the bailiff said, voice too big for the body it came from. They sat. Maya tucked her hands under the table and felt the grain. The fluorescent lights gave everything a faint buzz, like a cheap motel sign across the street at midnight. A pitcher sweated on a tray, water beating and running and leaving a dark ring that resembled a bruise. Opposing counsel, Sinclair's man, wore a smile. "You'd check for traps," he said, "Your Honor," like a man who practiced liking authority in the mirror. Preliminary motions rolled like gears engaging. Dates, exhibits, the choreography of people who live off procedure. Lionel went first. He swore in, voice low, old-fed calm, fingers square on the Bible, eyes on the work. We identified continued access to Mr. Caldwell's calendar through an inactive user. He said, Sylvia Warner. The attorney rolled his pen between his fingers. A clerical oversight. He offered. A pattern, Lionel said, and let the screen light the room with a map of logins. Timestamps beating out a rhythm. May 12, C. 14 p.m. May 27, Ju. 03 a.m. June 2, I. 52 a.m. His fingertips circled a cluster like a teacher around a wrong answer. The calls followed these. Sandra Rose, no theater, and Ms. Warner is now engaged to Mr. St. Clair. Lark Technologies coup. Yes. And child welfare was called the morning after a blocked vote on the acquisition. Yes. The judge's pen scratched. Steady. Somewhere a vent breathed. The quiet was the kind that lets footsteps travel. The man from Lark adjusted his cufflink and smiled at the jury box, as if one might be hiding there. Let's talk about Ms. Williams, he said, turning to the gallery's oxygen, like he'd found a way to own it. Her qualifications. Sandra's eyebrow moved half an inch. Preston's knee knocked the table and stilled. Ms. Williams was hired as house staff, he said. Cleaning. Correct. On paper, and yet she inserted herself into sensitive care. Maya stared at the wood again. The grain ran like water under ice. Her left thumb pressed the tiny scar near her knuckle she'd had since a diner shift and a hot plate. She breathed once through her nose and tasted metal. Your Honor, Sandra said. Standing. Relevance. Pattern of overreach, he said. Of influence. He turned. Miss Williams, do you feel qualified to make clinical decisions about a child with autism? Maya heard the hum of the lights before her own voice. She stood. The chair legs made a sound. She felt in her teeth. I didn't make clinical decisions, she said. I kept him from breaking his head open on a bookshelf. A few heads in the gallery snapped forward. The judge's mouth almost smiled. It didn't. Opposing counsel's pen clattered to the table, rolled, stopped against a legal pad, and later, he said, Did you not refuse to let state officials speak to him privately? I kept the door open, she said. He doesn't speak to strangers. He speaks when he's safe. He leaned, ready for the word he thought would win him the point. And who made you the determiner of safe? Silence. The air lens tightened. Maya's hand settled on the cool ring the sweating pitcher had left. Her palm picked up the shape, a slick crescent, half a heart. No one, she said. I did. Someone had to. The judge lifted a hand. Miss Williams, she said, would you be willing to testify today? Sandra turned a fraction toward her. Preston did not move. The room's hum got louder. Or the blood in her ears did. It didn't matter which. Yes, Maya said. The oath felt older than the room. She sat and told a story without adjectives. She told it in clean nouns and verbs. Hallway. Cry. Bookshelf. Hands open. Morning routines like scaffolding. Clay. Cards with faces. The patience it takes to hear a person where they actually speak. She didn't say trauma. She didn't say grief. She said, he put his palm on my knee when the room got loud. Did Mr. Caldwell instruct you to act outside your duties? The man asked. No. She saw the scar on the judge's index finger where a ring had rubbed for years, and then wasn't there anymore. I moved because his head was going to hit wood. Then I stayed because leaving would have been a kind of hitting, too. And what gives you the right to stay? She didn't answer fast. She let the question sit down between them and prove it belonged there. I promised someone once, she said, and felt a porch swing move in her bone, that if I saw that look again, I wouldn't walk away. The woman in the second row, who could have been a teacher, cleared her throat. A reporter set his phone down. The bailiff's shoes squeaked half a note. "That's enough," Judge Monroe said, and it was both mercy and authority. "You may step down, Miss Williams." Back in the hall, microphones sprouted like dandelions through concrete. The brightness of the bulbs asked for things, and took them anyway. "Do you love Mr. Caldwell? Are you after money? Is the child verbal? Did you manipulate?" Maya lifted a hand, and the questions hit her knuckles and fell. Preston moved in, not touching, shadowing. "You want to say something?" he asked. "Not to that," she said. A camera reached like a thirsty plant. She turned. "I don't do well with microphones unless they're attached to a vacuum." A couple of reporters laughed. "Real." The tightness broke just enough to walk to the car. Back at the house, the sun had found the time of day where it forgives marble. The foyer gave their footsteps back softer. Eli sat on the rug in the sunroom, lining up a row of blue blocks along the shadow edge. He saw her and held up his hand. 5 fingers splayed. She signed 5 back, then pressed her palm to his fingertip, toe fingertip. The bones light as bird feet under skin. "You okay?" she signed. He nodded and placed a block in her lap like a medal. From the doorway, Preston watched the exchange and swallowed once like it hurt. "I want to show you something," he said later. In the study, where the piano lid reflected a bent lamp, on the desk, a thick envelope, a notary stamp like a small, sleeping animal, his name in embossed ink, then hers in plain black inside. He slid the papers toward her. The room cooled. "My will," he said. "If something happens to me, you're his guardian." "No," she said, reflex, breath gone. "Don't put that in the air. It's already in it," he said. "I can't outspend that. I can sign against it." His hand shook once and stopped. "He's my heart," he said, and the words came out without polish. "But you," he didn't finish. He didn't have to. She didn't touch the paper. She laid her palm beside his and tapped twice. The rhythm they both knew now. It felt like touching a live wire that didn't burn. Days folded into the kind of waiting that stains teeth. The news ran their faces between storms and sports reels. Some nights Mrs. Green left tea. Some nights the house just left them alone. Eli learned a new shape with his hands more and used it on a song, on strawberries, on the swing when she rose to go. The order came down on a Wednesday that smelled like rain and copier heat. They were all in the kitchen. Judge Monroe's clerk called. Sandra put it on speaker and nodded as if the clerk could see her. "Motion dismissed with prejudice," the voice said, crisp as a new page. The court further notes grave concern regarding the use of state agencies for corporate leverage. Miss Williams' actions are recognized as protective in the highest sense. The call ended. The refrigerator motor kicked on. For a second, nobody moved. Mrs. N. Green wiped her eye with the heel of her hand like it had offended her. "Who wants pie?" she said to the sink. It broke the spell. Preston laughed once, a sound that hadn't come out of him in months and found itself rusty. He turned to Maya with that boyish astonishment grief never managed to strangle. We, she said. Outside. Light thinned and widened. Inside. Eli tapped her wrist and signed happy with both hands, jaw set like he was doing a job. She mirrored him, then bent and kissed the air near his hair. He pushed his bear toward her face so she could kiss that too. Later, alone in the nursery, she wiped the whiteboard clean to make room for tomorrow and stopped. The faint outline of a heart she'd tried to erase days ago floated up when the lamp hit at an angle. She traced above it without touching. A ghost, mirroring a ghost. In the window's dark, she could see her reflection and the soft square of the nightlight behind her. The glass carried her breath. Fogged, cleared. She made a small heart with one finger and let it fade on its own. Down the hall, the piano waited with the lid up, ready for hands. In the doorframe, Preston paused as if to ask without sound. She nodded. He crossed to the bench. His fingers found the simple progression and held there, a chord sustained just past where you think it will break, until your ears make meaning out of the weight. The skillet hissed like rain on a hot road. Maya stood barefoot on cool tile, batter thick on the ladle, cinnamon lifting off the steam in soft curls. The first pancake spread, edges turning lacy, a dark ring forming where the heat bit almost a heart if you tilted your head. The morning light came in slanted and forgiving, catching dust that had nowhere urgent to be. Smells like a bribe, Preston said, appearing in a plain white tee that made him look younger and a little lost. Tied draped over one shoulder like a reminder he could ignore. Guilty, she said. He likes the edges crisp. Eli patted in with his bear tucked under one arm, hair refusing any direction. He climbed the stool, set the bear down so it could watch, then held his palm up like a stop sign. She pressed her palm to his, bones like bird feet. Warmth that said we're here. On the counter, the muted television scrolled words across faces. A panel discussed the case like it belonged to them, the ticker calling her an unexpected hero. One breath, and a housemaid the next. The anchor smiled. The way people smile when they have good teeth. Preston glanced at it and turned the volume down to a whisper. We can eat in the sunroom, he said. Good, she said, sliding a pancake to a plate. I don't like being breakfast for talking heads. Dry humor, he said. Doctor's orders. Maya cut a triangle and offered it to Eli on a fork. He took it without looking up, jaw set like he had a job to finish. Syrup clung to his lip at the corner. He didn't wipe it. She did. Quick thumb. A small kiss of a gesture that didn't ask permission and still waited for it. A knock. Not the kind that made your throat go tight. This one was careful. The rhythm of someone who has delivered bad news enough to know better. Mrs. Green came in with a cream envelope on a tray as if it were part of the place setting. For Miss Williams, she said. Maya dried her hands on a towel and broke the seal. The paper had weight. The handwriting leaned forward like it wanted to be wherever it was going. Miss Williams, this court's work is law. Yours, it seems, is something older. If you would consider serving on the State Child Welfare Advisory Board, I will nominate you without reservation. We need voices whose authority comes from showing up. Adeline Monroe. Preston read over her shoulder. He did the same small breath he'd done on the porch the night Eli found a syllable. A click of surprise against bone. That's not small, he said. Maya pressed the edge of the paper to her sternum. It felt absurdly formal there. It's not just us, she said. No, he said. It isn't. The house was quiet for a beat. Even the refrigerator seemed to listen. You should go see it, he said. See what this can be when it's not a letter, he said. There's a community center on Maple. They do after school for kids with all kinds of needs. It's underfunded. It's trying anyway. You've been, she asked. Emma dragged me, he said, a faint smile and a wince in the same breath. She said, I needed to know what the world looked like when I wasn't designing it. They went after lunch. The day had warmed and then cooled the way days do when they can't make up their mind. Eli wore a cap he refused to remove. The community center was a squat blue building with a ramp that looked too steep and a door that stuck unless you hip-checked it. Inside smelled like dry markers, popcorn, and the indefinable sugar of little bodies that have been moving all day. A boy at the far table beat a pencil against cardboard until it frayed. A girl with headphones traced circles on construction paper, making the same heart over and over, each one a little off-center. A counselor with tired shoulders smiled with her eyes because her mouth had used up its smiles. The director came out, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I'm Lila," she said. "We run this circus." "Preston," he said. "Maya, this is Eli." Lila knelt so her face was level with the bear. "Nice to meet you, Eli," she said to its stitched eye. "We got a quiet corner if you like." She nodded toward a shelf with bins labeled with thick black letters. Sand, beads, cards, clay. Maya's fingers found the clay bin like they had a magnet. She set it on a low table and opened it. The scent rose school and summer and kitchen. "Want to make a farm," she said. Not at him. In the space near him, he didn't answer. He pressed his thumb into the clay and pulled it back to see his print. He made another next to it. 10 prints would make a line like train cars. A boy at the next table was trying to sign something to a volunteer who nodded in the rhythm of someone pretending to understand. Maya watched, then leaned over softly. "He's saying home," she said, shaping the sign under the boy's line of sight. "Roof." She lifted her hand, flat over her other. "Down." The boy's eyes lit. He repeated it, a little crooked. His grin was all gum and pride. The volunteer exhaled a thank you that sounded like she'd been holding her breath for a week. At the midpoint of the room, a broken clock hung over a corkboard full of flyers. Its hands had stopped at a time that meant nothing. The second hand twitched every few minutes, the ghost of a job. Maya touched the edge of the clock with 2 fingers as she passed. "We could fix that," she said. Lila shrugged without shame. "We fix what matters first." Preston walked the perimeter like he was mapping a new project. He stopped by a poster with a heart drawn by a child whose hand had hesitated and pushed too hard in the last curve. The paper buckled where the marker bled through. He looked at it longer than a poster deserves. On the way out, Leela caught Maya's elbow. "If you want to volunteer," she said, "we have Saturdays. If you want to teach, I can find you a room and kids who will make you better at it." Maya felt the tilt of something in her chest. Fear and purpose share a spine. "I'd like that," she said. In the car, the air smelled like crayons lodged under the seats of 100 field trips. Eli held the clay bin on his lap like a treasure he had checked out. He made the sign for more and smiled without showing his teeth. Back at the house, the garden had that 5 o'clock gold that makes everything look like it's pretending to be itself. Camellias were full, petals stacked like forgetfulness. They walked the gravel path. The sound underfoot made its own kind of music. "Why did you take the job?" he asked, not looking at her. "Because the rent was due would have been easy. Because she had a grandmother who said doors aren't gentle and you go through anyway. Because a cry from a room she wasn't supposed to enter had sounded exactly like her own years ago. To remember who I am," she said. He nodded. He must have expected money. He looked grateful he was wrong. "I owe you an apology," he said. He picked a camellia and didn't know what to do with it, so he kept holding it. "When you came, I saw a role, not a person." "I saw a role too," she said. "I just happened to fit yours less than he fit mine." A bee worried a flower near her elbow and then changed its mind. Wind shifted the hedge. A petal fell, landed on the gravel, then flipped itself over like it had somewhere else to be. The world kept working without asking their permission. In the study, he opened a drawer and took out a photo album. The leather had a crease down the middle where it had been opened and closed and opened again. He flipped to a page where a woman with rain-crazy hair held a baby who hadn't learned where to focus yet. Emma looked at the camera like it had told a joke she'd heard before and still liked. "She filmed everything," he said, "so we wouldn't forget the details." He set the album on the piano, lifted the lid. The smell of old wood and strings, rose metal and dust and something sweet. He played a chord with two wrong fingers and didn't apologize. Maya hummed a line, the tune that had found them on a night when the porch had stopped, pretending it wasn't a sanctuary. He stopped and turned. "Thank you for staying," he said. She didn't say "you're welcome." She tapped her fingers twice on the edge of the piano. The wood carried the sound into the spine of the instrument and swallowed it. That night, on the porch, the swing creaked a half-inch and held. Eli fell asleep with his cheek on Maya's thigh, and his hand small and certain against her knee. The house lit itself room by room like a ship, keeping track of where everybody was. "You're going to take the board seat," Preston said, not asking. "I think so," she said. "If they'll take a woman who still looks in the pantry and counts apples before she says yes to anything, they will," he said. "They need someone who knows what groceries cost." "You trying to be charming?" she asked. "It's either that or bourbon," he said. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. The street in the distance offered a few cars that respected the speed limit. A plane drew a white line up there no one could reach. Somewhere in the hedges, a bird decided night was good enough for one more conversation. Preston glanced at her hand where it rested on the bench. He lifted his half a question. She didn't move away. Fingers touched. Not an admission. Not a promise. A tactful truce. Inside, the baby monitor breathed static. The red light pulsed on, off, on a small, stubborn heartbeat on a plastic box. Maya watched it and felt the echo answer in her, a crooked, human beat that had been off for a long time and was learning how to keep time again. She stood, careful not to wake Eli. In the kitchen window, her breath made a cloud. She drew a small heart in it with a knuckle and watched it blur, then vanish. The glass held the warmth a moment longer than it should have. Then it let go. In the nursery, the whiteboard looked clean until the lamp slid over it and found the faintest residue of a shape her hand had tried to wipe away days ago. It was still there if you knew what to look for. She didn't trace it. She understood now that some marks are a kind of promise. Not loud, not permanent, but resistant to nonsense. She capped the marker and listened. The house exhaled. The piano string hummed a no sound under the sound. And somewhere a clock ticked a second that the broken clock at the center had refused to keep. The red light on the baby monitor pulsed like a small, stubborn heart. Morning tilted through the kitchen blind, striping the countertop, warming the steel kettle to a hum. Maya stood with a dish towel over her shoulder, sleeves pushed to the elbows, phone face down by the sink, as if it were something alive that might bite. It buzzed. She flipped it. One message. "No name. I know what you are. He'll find out. You don't belong there." Her thumb hovered over reply, then drifted away. She set the phone next to the monitor and watched the red dot breathe. The house kept its rhythm pipes ticking, the refrigerator swallowing a sigh. Mrs. Green in the hall throwing a bleached rag over her shoulder like a flag of truce. Preston appeared in the doorway, tea in his fist, shirt not buttoned all the way. "You're up too early," he said, though his eyes were rimmed with the same sleepless color. "Couldn't tell my head no," she said. He poured coffee. He didn't seem to taste. He glanced at the phone screen and then at her face, the way a man checks a gauge and knows the reading is bad without needing numbers. "What is it?" She passed him the phone. He read the message once, and his mouth did a thin line that looked like control and felt like rage. "We're done letting this into the house," he said. "It already is," she said, and ran water over a plate just to have something to do with her hands. He called Lionel. The answer came fast. The voice of a man whose alarm clock sleeps with shoes on. "By noon, Vans, unmarked but obvious, rolled up the drive. Men in neat polos unloaded cases like they were moving a small, polite war into the hedges. Motion sensors the size of dominoes. Discreet cameras that pretended to be screws. A drone, the color of bad weather. "You sure?" Lionel asked in the study, laying a blueprint over the piano lid. "Perimeter this tight is a statement." "I'm sick of statements," Preston said, and buttoned his shirt all the way, every hole. A checkbox he could finally check. Maya stood in the doorway and felt the house contract and expand around the new edges. Protection wore the shape of machines. It made a sound like a whisper and a promise at the same time. By evening, the article went live. The headline used her name and the word queen, as if a woman with a vacuum couldn't also have a spine. The photo they chose made her jaw look stubborn. The pull quote took her gentlest sentence and turned it into a motive. Mrs. Green found her on the back porch and handed over tea. "I read it," she said, making the words dry enough to crumble. "People who can't boil an egg always have opinions on fire." Maya laughed, soft and accidental. It loosened her throat a notch. "You're insubordinate," she said. "Occupational hazard." Mrs. Green said, and left the door open behind her on purpose, so the smell of lemon oil and supper could reach the night air. Preston sat later with his back to the railing, long legs out, the last of the day clinging to him like smoke. He didn't say sorry. She didn't ask for it. The swing moved and settled. Eli was a warm comma between them, his feet in socks with rockets, his bear in a chokehold that meant safe. On the coffee table inside, the television played without sound. A panel's mouths moved. One face looked kind and said a sentence that made the others blink. "Preston Caldwell defends employee," appeared under her name. It scrolled like something trying not to fall apart in public. He touched the remote, turned the sound up, and then down again like he couldn't decide if he wanted proof. "I issued a statement," he said. "It won't change them. It's for us." "For him," she said, tilting her chin toward Eli. "For him," he said, and rubbed the heel of his hand against his sternum, like something in there had an edge. When Eli stirred, he did it the way children do when they trust the place between sleep and wake will hold. He blinked as if claws of light had snagged the air. He pressed his cheek harder into Maya's hip. "Knies Tuking," a small animal finding the burrow. Preston slid off the swing and knelt on the plank. He signed clumsy. "Careful safe, Daddy." Love his fingers a beat behind his own intention. Not graceful, but honest, each motion landing with the dignity of someone learning a language with their whole body. Ellie watched, the solemn patience of judges and cats. He copied love, the heel of his hand missing his chest and finding his shoulder, but close enough that the meaning crossed. Maya felt the prick of something in her nose that warned tears. She pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth and breathed slow until it passed. "He's teaching you," she said. "I'm late to class," Preston said. "Good seat still open," she said. He looked up, the porch light laying a bland halo on his hair, and smiled in a way that admitted defeat on some front. He no longer cared about winning. The wind shifted through the hedges. Somewhere on the perimeter, a sensor blinked, and then went back to pretending it was brick. At the midpoint of the night, the house felt like a theater after the show warmth. Arrangements, the ghost of voices. Maya tucked Eli into bed, anchored him with his weighted blanket, stood long enough to feel the slow tide of his breath pull at the fabric. She sketched a heart on the fog, her own breath made on the nursery window, and let it fade. Downstairs, her phone buzzed on the counter. Another unknown. Another line thrown into a life that wasn't theirs to fish in. She silenced it, turned the face down, and the little red monitor light beat on. Indifferent, they sat again on the porch. The swing creaked like an old man asked to stand. Moths fussed at the fixture. The air had that clean scent right after water leaves the leaves. A coolness that lifts the hair on your forearms and makes you remember being small. "You regret bringing me into this?" she asked. The question slipped out before she could tuck it back under her tongue. He didn't answer right away. He looked past the hedges to the road he'd bought to guarantee silence. His jaw moved once, then he took her hand like a dare and put it on his chest where his tie lay when he wore one. "No," he said. The word landed and then spread its weight, a steady, bearable pressure against the palm. Beneath it, his heart kept its work, uncreative and miraculous. The broken clock over the community center corkboard drifted through her mind the way the second hand twitched every now and then, as if it remembered. Eli made a sound then, small, and from the throat. He shifted, hand sliding, palm seeking, landing against her knee. He breathed once like testing ice. His mouth formed around something he hadn't shaped in so long his tongue forgot the path. "Mama," he said. The syllables were soft as a bruise touched days later to see if it still hurts. The porch, the night, the sensors, the hedges, all of it paused, as if the house itself had been waiting for a line cue. Maya didn't move. Preston didn't breathe. The swing hung suspended between a creak and the next. "What did you say?" she whispered. The question meant more for the moment than the boy. Eli's eyes fluttered and closed again. Sleep took him back. His hand stayed on her knee. The mouth that had opened once like a door eased shut. Preston's face cracked in the middle. Not a break, an opening. He pressed his forehead to the back of the swing slat and let his breath shiver out. He made the sign for love to the dark, to the window, to whoever was watching, and to no one. "Say it again," he said, in a voice that remembered singing and didn't dare. Then, softer, "It's enough." Inside, the television showed the city from far above, a grid of moving lights that looked like a creature thinking. The anchors moved to weather. The crawler ran out of words and started over. The panel smiled. The sound stayed off. Maya looked at her hand, still over his heart, and then at the small hand on her knee, and thought of the broken clock, the red monitor light, the smear of syrup she'd wiped without looking. The motif stitched itself without ceremony. They didn't toast it. There was nothing to toast. They held the space until it set. She felt the tension under her ribs spool down a half-inch. Not gone. Shifted. She could live with shifted. Lionel texted a photo at 11. A still of a car idling 3 houses down, heavily tinted, plates that belonged to an address with no apartment. He'd already sent it to someone who wore a badge and pretended to like men like Lionel. He added a note, "We see them," which felt like both a threat and a blessing. "Let them watch," Preston said. When she showed him, "They don't own our sound." They carried Eli to bed together. The weighted blanket went on. The bear took its seat. The nightlight made it square. In the hum of the fan, a string on the piano somewhere decided to agree with the air and gave a small, sympathetic sound. In the hallway, she hesitated. The house had dozens of rooms, some for display, some for use, some just to be able to say there were that many. She had been given a room, and then a role, and then a title. None of it felt like it fit what had just happened on a porch swing older than the security system. "Stay," he said, without touching her. She stood at the threshold and touched the door jamb, where hands have always touched wood before crossing. The paint had been glossed over 10 times, but beneath it the groove remained. A print of 100 palms. She put hers there and felt the heat. The red light on the monitor pulsed again and again, faithful as a metronome a child could follow. "Okay," she said. They sat on the floor of the hallway outside the nursery, backs to opposite walls, knees almost touching, talking in low sentences about nothing that mattered, sockets that needed covers, a grocery list, the way the camellias drop whole instead of petal by petal like other flowers. Every third sentence fell away and left them with the quiet, and that quiet did good work. None of their talking could. Below, the new cameras blinked their quiet wink. Beyond the hedges, the idling car finally gave up and drifted into the kind of night that keeps its own counsel. On the rug, between their feet, a faint shape in the carpet where Eli's toy train had run 1,000 laps, caught a thread of light. It curved and looped and came back on itself like a crude heart drawn by a hand that didn't mind being imperfect. Maya touched the outline with 2 fingers, not tracing, just acknowledging. The clock in the guest room down the hall ticked on the second and then didn't and then did. The broken one in her head twitched, then found the beat again. The courthouse security wand flashed a red dot against her wrist. Cold air breathed from the vents, enough to raise bumps along her forearms. The atrium smelled of paper and floor polish, and the damp wool of coats shaken off at the door. Cameras murmured in the gallery like insects in heat. Maya stepped through the metal detector and felt the wand pass over her hair. The hollow thud when the guard tapped the rubber mat with his boot. "Phone in the tray," he said. She slid it in, screen down. The guard's eyes softened an inch when he saw the wallpaper, a kid's hand, palm up, flour dusted from pancake batter. He didn't comment. He pushed the tray toward her as if returning a small animal. Preston waited beyond the rope. T nodded right, jaw set wrong. "You okay?" he asked. "Define okay," she said. "Standing," he said. "Then okay," she said, and took a breath that tasted like disinfectant and nerves. They moved together down the hallway toward the courtroom, souls whispering on the wax tile. Lionel peeled off from a column where he'd been pretending to read a notice. He carried a stiff, zipped portfolio like a man bringing evidence to a country that preferred rumors. "We've got the access logs," he said, low. "Email headers. The calendar pings. The IP trail. She used a ghost account. They forgot to kill when they fired her. Maya nodded. The name didn't need saying. Sylvia appeared in the corner of Maya's eye anyway. A slick blade in a blazer, hair parted with confidence, ring catching light like a tiny compass that only ever pointed at herself. Next to her, a man with COO shoulders and an expensive sneer whispered into a lawyer's ear. Inside, oak benches, brass fixtures, a flag standing too straight. The air held that acoustic hush meant for oaths and verdicts. On the far wall, a clock ticked a beat too fast. The second hand jerked forward, impatient. Judge Adeline Monroe entered with the quiet authority of someone who doesn't need the gavel to be heard. Silver hair pulled back clean, eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised and kept going anyway. "All rise." They rose. They sat. The room did its choreography. "This court will hear Caldwell Dynamics v. Lark Technologies," Monroe said. "Counsel. Appearances." Laviers spoke. Names unfurled like credentials. Letters falling off tongues. Esquire, LLC, Ph.D. Small armor pieces that clinked when they hit the table. The first witness came and went. Process. Foundation. The room warmed with the friction of words. Lionel took the stand like a man who would apologize to no one for speaking clearly. "You are a licensed security consultant." The defense opened. "I am," he said. "You conducted an audit of Mr. Caldwell's systems." "I did." Lionel talked in verbs. "Accessed, logged, cross-checked." "It didn't Thorn." He showed the graph, a line of pings marching from a revoked credential to a laptop that lived in an apartment leased by Sylvia until 2 months ago, then moved into a condo under the COO's name. The jurors, 3 with notebooks, 2 with knit brows, 1 with a hand on his chest, like he was pledging to something he couldn't name, followed the line with their eyes. You could almost see the moment they understood a calendar could be a weapon. We are not here to impugn Ms. Warner's character, Lark's attorney Dip, all butter and knife, only to determine whether any wrongdoing rises to the level alleged. It rises, Lionel said. Objection. The attorney said. Sustained. The judge said, but her gavel stayed down. Midway through, the COO Greg Sinclair leaned to whisper at Sylvia. His cufflinks flashed. His mouth formed a smile without teeth. Maya watched them the way you watch a snake from the corner of your eye, respecting the courtesy of distance but not believing in it. Miss Williams, the bailiff called. She stood. The bench was polished to a shine, and the wood received her palm like it knew how to hold the truth without editorializing. Oath said. She sat. The cushion stole a bit of her height. She adjusted her spine and let the room take her in. State your name for the record. Preston's counsel said. Maya Williams, she said. Occupation. She looked at Preston for a blink. His face didn't tell her what to say. Good. Caregiver, she said. And I clean when something needs cleaning. A girl in the second row smiled into her sleeve. Miss Williams, the lawyer said, please describe the day investigators came to the house. She did, not with adjectives, with temperature, angles, the way the clipboard had a chip on one corner, the phrasing of, may we come in as a thing people use when they plan to enter regardless. She told them about Eli's hands, how they trembled, like he was holding a small motor under his skin he didn't know how to turn off, about the way silence can be safety and a weapon depending who owns it. And did Mr. Caldwell instruct you to act beyond your duties? No, she said. Then why did you? Maya glanced at the clock that ticked too fast. Its second hand jerked again because a child was calling and nobody was answering. She said, objection. The other lawyer said, speculation. Overruled, Judge Monroe said, and the gavel tapped once like a finger on a tabletop. The opposing attorney approached with a stack of papers held like a prop. Miss Williams, you are not a licensed therapist. No. You have no advanced degrees. No. You were, at the time, employed as what? House staff? Yes. And yet you presume to, I presume to sit, she said, keeping her hands open on her thighs, and wait, and sign, and not leave? It's lucky, the attorney said, that you happen to have that skill. Luck is for parking spaces, she said, and someone near the back snorted before swallowing it whole. Miss Williams, he pushed, almost smiling. Do you expect this court to believe you are uniquely qualified to advise on child welfare at the state level? No, she said, and let the word rest. I expect this court to believe there are people who show up. I'm one. He blinked. Paper shifted under his fingers. He moved to sit and then thought better of it. Preston watched her with a kind of stillness that wasn't statue still, more like a man holding a full glass in a crowd and deciding not to spill. His tie lay perfect, his hands clenched and released on the table, as if practicing letting go. Miss Williams, the judge said, leaning a fraction forward, voice mild. How do you define harm? Maya folded one finger into her palm, then another, counting without counting. Harm is when someone learns silence as a language they didn't want, she said. The room breathed in, and then remembered how to breathe out. Thank you, the judge said. At the noon recess, the hallway filled with a rustle of suits, the warm exhale of vending machine coffee, the sharp tap of heels that had opinions. Reporters formed a corridor without quite touching. Miss Williams, do you? She kept her eyes on the baseboard and followed the line where two colors of paint met and argued. A hand found her elbow and then left it. Preston. He didn't ask how she was. He held up a paper cup like a white flag. It's hot, he said, and not very good. That fits, she said, and took a sip that burned just enough to feel like something. Across the hall, Sylvia stood near a window, where light made a perfect pain on her cheekbone. Sinclair whispered. She stared out like the glass belonged to her, and the city owed her a better view. Why? Maya asked. Preston knew the question didn't require a subject. Because I said no to a number and made them feel small, he said. Because small people don't like the mirror. She glanced at him. Some mirrors are kind. He looked at the paper cup like it had an answer. This isn't, he said. They moved back in when the bailiff called. The room cooled again. The broken fast clock ticked a half beat ahead. Closing arguments came like weather you could smell before you saw hot wind. Then rain. Lark's counsel spoke of markets, privacy, misunderstandings that any reasonable adult could have. Caldwell's counsel spoke of dignity, weaponized bureaucracy, the line between competition and cruelty. Your Honor, he finished, this is a case about who gets to define the cost of winning. Silence, that useful instrument, spread over the benches. The judge looked down at her notes, then up at the room. For a moment, everything emptied, no camera clicks, no throat clears, just the hum of the lights and the soft scrape of a pen when she set it exactly parallel to another. Court will recess, she said. I will return with a ruling. Gavel. Wood on wood, a sound that means wait. People stood the way people stand when they aren't sure whether to be relieved yet. The clock's second hand jumped, eager as a child, ready to be dismissed. Maya felt the pulse in her wrist and thought of the baby monitor's red dot steady, indifferent, a small, stubborn heart, insisting on its job regardless of what the adults claimed was at stake. She stayed seated. She folded her hands and let them rest on the cool rail. Fingers interlaced, skin damp at the knuckles. Preston didn't speak. He didn't need to. The space between them held through the window. Clouds thickened and then thinned in a slow argument with the sun. Dust motes did their endless dance. In the quiet, a piano string maybe in her head, maybe here gave a sympathetic hum you could almost take from memory. She closed her eyes for a breath and saw a porch light, a swing, a mouth shaping a word that had cracked time in half. She opened them to the empty bench, the empty witness chair, the flag still standing too straight. The motif held itself together without asking permission. When the judge returned, her robe brushed the wood like a sigh. Maya's heart caught twice, then remembered the beat. The second hand jerked to 12 and hung there, trembling. Hold. The courtroom clock twitched, then caught the beat. Light pooled on the varnished floor, bright as fresh milk. The air tasted recycled, metallic. Maya kept her hands folded on the rail, tried not to grip. Leather chairs sighed as people sat again. The judge looked up, the room tipping toward her like a ship obeying moonlight. In the matter before this court, Judge Monroe said, voice even, I find insufficient evidence to sustain Lark Technologies' claims, a pause that let the sentence land, shoulder first, and persuasive evidence that individuals connected to Lark abuse state processes to inflict fear. The sound was small at first, one throat clearing, a breath, and then it widened. Pens scratched, a shoe scuffed. Sylvia's smile tightened until it looked like it hurt. This court dismisses the action with prejudice. Monroe continued. Further, I'm referring the misuse of welfare reporting to the Attorney General. She shifted her gaze, not unkind, to Maya. Miss Williams, the record recognizes your conduct as humane and exemplary. Maya blinked. She felt her chest rise, then refused to fall for an extra second, like a wave holding a glass edge at the top before it breaks clean. On the other side, Sinclair leaned toward Sylvia so close, his cufflink flashed light into her eye. His whisper was a blade hidden in velvet. She tilted her head away, jaw working. The gavel tapped once, dry as knuckle on wood. It was done, not finished. Done. Outside, the day had turned thin and bright. The steps were a stone spine down to cameras and microphones and mouths, practicing empathy. The wind carried a smell of pretzels from a cart and heat, lifting off bus brakes. Lionel flanked them, a quiet wall with soft shoes. Statement only. Preston murmured. Mayanoddet. She let the first questions hit like rain on a hood. She spoke 2 sentences that were the truth, and nothing extra. We're going home, she finished, the words simple enough to survive, being quoted, Miss Williams, a woman called, voice steady from years of storms. What now? Maya looked past the mics. A man across the street held his daughter's hand, their fingers linked loose, the girl breaking stride to hop every third crack. We cook dinner, she said, and walked. They made it to the car without looking back. The door thunked shut with the solid kindness of German engineering. The cabin smelled faintly of leather and lemon cleanser. For a second, nobody spoke. You were steady, Preston said. You were, she said. Lionel, he asked, glancing in the mirror. I'll circle the block. Lionel said, let him photograph your taillights. In the quiet, the same clock in her head tried a fast beat and then settled. The motif eased into its chair like it belonged. The house met them with a hush that wasn't fear. The foyer held cool air, and the oak table with its bowl of keys, far off, a dishwasher exhaled. A red dot on the baby monitor pulsed from the counter. Sentimental. A ver? Mrs. Green appeared with a towel thrown over one shoulder. I kept the sauce on low, she said, just as tends to overcook pasta. Maya let a laugh slip. You're a menace. Occupational hazard. Mrs. Green said again, then softened. He's in the sunroom. He napped through a revolution. They found him under the soft spill of late light, one shoe off, one on, bare half smothering his face. The window glass held the day in clean rectangles. Dust motes spun slow. Preston knæled. He didn't wake the boy. He just looked long enough to recalibrate. Maya sat on the edge of the rug, palms on the weave, and let her eyes close. The quiet beat stretched. In it was the courthouse, the plaque with the judge's name, the rubber smell of the wand. In it was a porch swing, and a word that split something open. A phone buzzed. Not hers, Preston's. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then held it out. For you, he said. Judge Monroe's clerk. She stood, heart picking up, and stepped into the hall. The walls there held lighter echo. This is Maya. The clerk's voice had the bright timbre of someone carrying good news upstairs. Judge Monroe asked me to pass along an invitation. The State Child Welfare Advisory Board has an open seat. She'd like to nominate you. Maya absorbed it like a body taking water after a long heat, not gulping, letting. She pressed 2 fingers to her brow and smiled without meaning to. I'd be honored. We'll send paperwork. The clerk said, thank you for how you showed up. After the call, Maya stood for a moment with her forehead against the cool wall. It smelled faintly of paint and lemon. The broken clock in her head ticked twice, then rested, then ticked again in a time closer to true. She found Preston in the kitchen uncorking nothing. He'd picked up the habit of touching bottles, and then stopping. He set 2 water glasses on the counter like a toast he could live with. Well, he said, they want me, she said. Of course they do. Don't, she said, somehow laughing and crying at once. Don't say it like it was inevitable. He looked at the faucet, at the way the water ran clear, then clouded, then cleared. It wasn't, he said, but you made it look that way. They ate in the nook, with the cracked tiles she loved. Eli woke and wandered in on socked feet, hair trying to escape its own idea. He slid onto the bench, eyes bare. Maya twisted a napkin and broke it and folded it again. Preston cut bread with the seriousness of surgery. "Good day," Preston said, almost casual. Eli signed more with two small, decisive taps. He reached for a piece of bread and then, unprompted, set one in Maya's palm. Gaze steady. She breathed through her nose so she wouldn't choke on feeling. She signed thank you and touched her chest. The news found them anyway. A muted television in the corner showed a crawl, Lark executives under investigation. Letters gliding left, like quiet tide. A split screen put Sylvia's photo next to an office towel. Her mouth had lost its geometry. "Self-inflicted," Lionel said from the doorway. Hands in pockets, he slid a printout onto the table. Public filings, emails, timestamps like a string of beads. Hubris is kindling. All I did was strike a match. You're poetic for a man who wears cargo pockets. Preston said, "Dry. Don't tell anyone." Lionel said, "It'll ruin my brand." Eli giggled, a low sound like a motor starting without complaint. He knocked his heel against the bench and leaned into Maya's side. The weight was slight. The meaning wasn't. After dinner, the sky turned violet and paper-thin. They drove to a community center that wore its year's openly scuffed baseboards, linoleum patchwork. The lobby smelled like pencil shavings and bleach. A broken clock over the corkboard read 2 o'clock forever, stubborn as weather. In the playroom, kids spread like constellations. One boy traced circles on a tablet with the blunt gravity of study. A girl held a red car and counted its wheels over and over to be sure. Volunteers in t-shirts tried not to be too loud about their kindness. The director, a woman with forearms like ropes and eyes that had been waiting for this day, met them halfway. "We could use hand," she said. "Not please. Not maybe." Statement. Maya tied her hair back. She knelt beside the boy with the tablet. His fingers were slick with snack sugar. "Can I try?" she asked, already mirroring his circle. He watched, then let the pattern widen. The circle growing so large it became an arc, then a line. He looked at her, surprised, and suddenly delighted. It wasn't language, not like classrooms want, but it said everything. Preston stood in the doorway and let the noise wash him clean. He slid his hands into his pockets like a man keeping himself from reaching for his phone. He didn't need it here. Eli drifted to a shelf of wooden animals, chose a giraffe, then chose a second, and turned them to face each other, as if conversation might be possible between necks that long. Midway through the hour, the broken clock over the corkboard caught a glint and flung it down. The hands didn't move. Time did, anyway. On their way out, the director stopped Maya with a hand on her sleeve. "If you want to design something formal, a program, tell me what to call it," she said. "Start with chairs that don't squeak," Maya said, and the woman laughed the deep laugh of agreement. Back home, the night pulled taut like a drumhead. They didn't turn on lights they didn't need. Preston went to his study and pulled down a photo album with a soft spine. He hesitated, then set it between them on the couch. The pages smelled like dust and perfume. The photos moved from glossy to matte, to a brief strip of nothing, and then began again with new images. Eli at the window. A hand on a knee. A porch swing. A page left blank on purpose. "We'll fill that," he said. "We will," she said, and the "we" was not casual. Eli dozed with his bear facing out as if on watch. The monitor's red dot pulsed from the mantel in a slow, faithful metronome, indifferent to news cycles, to courts, to men who built towers and fell from them. Maya watched it while the room inhaled and exhaled without asking her to explain a thing. "I wrote a new will," Preston said after a while, the words shaped like he'd practiced them. "You're listed, not as staff." She didn't answer. She touched the album spine. She looked at him. Something like fear crossed his face, and then left with its hands up. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "You're doing it," she said. They carried Eli upstairs together, the three of them navigating a turn that used to squeak and now didn't. In the nursery, the nightlight carved a square of honey on the floor. They set him down, one hand each smoothing blanket, the choreographed grace of people who learned the other's reach. In the hall, they didn't part right away. He put a hand on the door jamb because people always have. She matched his hand with her palm, skin to paint, two prints overlapping where 100 had before. "Stay," he said, not an order, a hope. She kept her hand there, then let it drop. "Tomorrow," she said, and the day after. He nodded, relief, and something like grief moving through his features. Old weather leaving the room. "Tomorrow," he echoed. Downstairs, the TV played a segment about markets reversing and executives taking leave to spend time with family. Sinclair's photo shrank to a corner as the anchor shifted to sports. The ticker kept crawling, relentless as a treadmill. Maya turned the TV off. The house heard itself, pipes settled. A branch ticked the window. Somewhere, very soft, the piano answered the air. On the porch, the swing knew their weight now and didn't complain. The hedges held their line. The new cameras blinked their unromantic blink. The idling car from nights before didn't return. Or if it did, it learned better habits. She sat and closed her eyes. The night smelled like cut grass and heat leaving stone. She thought of the broken clock over the corkboard, and the fast courtroom clock, and the red dot that refused poetry. She thought of how all of them were right in their way. What measured time, and what it did to you, and what you did with it. Inside, a small voice stirred and settled. A hand reached for fabric and found it. A man in a study tucked a pen parallel to another, then let his shoulders fall. Maya's eyes opened to the thin line of dawn sliding under the dark. The swing moved half an inch and stopped. She lifted her hand and drew a heart on her knee with her finger, not looking. The motion practiced, a private sign. The clock in her head twitched, made up its mind, and chose the beat she could stand.